You're not gonna believe this, but by the time I turned 32, I had spent most of my adult life just roaming across the United States, chasing sunsets and broken dreams. It all started when my grandfather, the one person in my family who really understood me, passed away from a heart attack exactly 7 days before my 19th birthday, and here's where it gets crazy, for some reason I still don't fully understand. He decided to leave his entire company to me. Now, let's be real, I had zero interest in running a business. I didn't know the first thing about management, balance sheets, any of that. I figured my dad, who was actually my grandfather's son-in-law, would have been the obvious choice. I mean, my mom was Grandpa's only surviving child after her 2 brothers gave their lives during Operation Desert Storm, so naturally, she wanted the business to stay in the family, meaning she thought Dad should take it over. But the second, and I mean the literal second, I told Grandpa's lawyer that I needed a little time to think it through. My parents were all over me like vultures, pushing, pleading, practically demanding that I just sign it all over to Dad. Grandpa's lawyer, a sharp old guy named Mr. Carson, handed me his card and made it crystal clear. He would only speak to me directly about the matter, not my parents, not anyone else. We left the law office that day, my parents pulling away in Dad's shiny black SUV, and me firing up Grandpa's old, beat-up Harley Davidson. When I say old, I mean seriously old. The thing was 10 years older than I was. Still, it had a spirit, you know. A freedom I desperately needed. And I guess the fight was already brewing, because even while we were driving, I knew they were planning to bully me into handing over the company. What they didn't know, and what they would find out the hard way, was that I would do just about anything to get away from them. In one last glorious act of rebellion, I cranked the throttle, peeled off onto the interstate, and just gunned it, flying at least 20 miles over the speed limit. I never once looked back to see if they were following me. I knew I couldn't afford to. I made my way straight to my buddy's apartment, and trust me, you're gonna want to remember him for later because he's part of this mess too. I used his phone, since mine was blowing up like a Christmas tree with calls and angry texts from my parents. I got Mr. Carson on the line, told him to go ahead and sell the company, and he handled everything from there. Looking back, I truly believe Grandpa knew I wasn't cut out to run his business. I think deep down, he just wanted to give me a chance, a way out from under my parents' thumb. Whether I got a place of my own or hit the road for good, I think Grandpa would have been proud either way. Now, you probably need a little background to understand why getting away was so important. See, when I hit middle school, it was like my true self just locked into place. I discovered heavy metal music, fell in love with biker culture, figured out the kind of movies and shows I vibed with, and found a small circle of friends who just got me, and from that point on, I was open about it, proud of it even. But my parents? They absolutely hated every single thing about who I was becoming. It didn't matter that I was pulling straight A's or that my teachers loved me. In their eyes, I was some kind of delinquent waiting to happen. They started drug testing me at random, which was bad enough, but it got even worse when I wasn't in sports seasons because then my school wasn't handling it anymore. One time, my mom caught me listening to Judas Priest on my little iPod Nano. This was back around 2009, for reference, and she straight up confiscated it for a week. Thank God she didn't know how to wipe the music off it, or I would have lost my whole collection. They used to steal my car magazines, too, like, literally sneak into my room and take them, and when I called them out, their punishment? No dinner that night. I wish I was joking. And the TV shows they banned. Don't even get me started. The Fast and the Furious, Sons of Anarchy, Breaking Bad, all off limits because they thought it would feed my addictions. And here's the real kicker, I was completely straight edge. I didn't touch alcohol, didn't touch anything else, didn't even so much as think about it. I didn't even have my first drink until my 21st birthday. Girls. Sure, I liked girls, but I wasn't some reckless player either. Speaking of which, I had 3 girlfriends during high school, and not one of them earned my parents' approval. If you're curious how they turned out, the first is now a licensed therapist, the second, well, she's an adult film actress, and the third is a stay-at-home mom raising twin girls. Make of that what you will, but if you ask me, my parents were dead wrong at least 2 out of 3 times. I remember opening up to Grandpa about all of it. I mean, when you're a teenager and you feel like the walls are closing in, you need someone to lean on, so, one Thanksgiving when I was 16, I just let it all spill out in front of the whole family. And let me tell you, Grandpa snapped. He laid into my parents right then and there, no hesitation, no holding back. It was epic. Sure, there were only about 10 people there, because, well, most of our family tree had been sadly cut short after my uncle's deaths, but still, it felt like the whole world saw the truth that day. After that, things sort of got better, not perfect, but better. Whenever my parents pulled their usual stunts, I'd call Grandpa, and he would absolutely read them the riot act. Of course, my parents caught on pretty fast, and they'd punish me by taking away my phone, but Grandpa wasn't a fool. If he didn't hear from me for too long, he knew something was up. One time, after about a month of silence, he just showed up at our front door, no warning, no call, and when he heard my side of things, he believed me over whatever lies my parents tried to spin. That day, he forced them to give my phone back, and after that, he made it a habit to pop in unexpectedly, just to make sure I was okay. And one conversation we had, man, it stuck with me. He told me, I might not love every little thing you're into, but the only thing that matters is that you grow into your own man. Those words, I'll carry them with me till the day I die. By the time I hit 17, it was crystal clear to my parents that they couldn't force me to give up the things I loved, not without Grandpa breathing down their necks, and they knew better than to risk his bad side. If they pissed him off, Dad's dream of inheriting the company would go up in smoke. So, they shifted tactics. Instead of full-blown fights, it was constant little digs, death by 1,000 cuts. Mom would snark, "How can you even understand that noise?" Whenever she caught me blasting Black Sabbath's Iron Man. One morning, I was just walking from my room to the kitchen and she muttered, "There goes the teenage rebel," like I was some cautionary tale on two legs. I'll admit, all the crap they gave me did push me into one good decision, getting a job. I started flipping burgers at McDonald's just to have an excuse to be out of the house, and it paid off, literally. That job gave me the money to start fixing up Grandpa's old Harley that had been gathering dust in his garage. Piece by piece, hour by hour, I brought that bike back to life, and sure enough, when I turned 18, Grandpa handed me the keys. It was mine. God, my parents hated that, but Grandpa shut them down, reminding them I was an adult now, and there wasn't a damn thing they could do about it. From that point on, I spent about 80% of my senior year unofficially living at Grandpa's house, and honestly, it was the best thing that could have happened. I know I'm rambling a little here, sorry about that, there's just a lot to unpack. Anyway, back to the day of Grandpa's will reading. After I peeled off on the Harley and sped to Brandon's place. You remember Brandon, right? My phone lit up like a Christmas tree, angry calls, threatening texts, voicemails filled with guilt trips and ultimatums, exactly what you'd expect. Luckily, I had a plan. I'd already packed a saddlebag with enough essentials to crash at Brandon's for a few days. My parents couldn't spend all day chasing me, they had work in the morning. But me? I had nowhere to be. The next day, while Brandon was at work, he tossed me his car keys without even asking. I drove over to my parents' house while they were gone and grabbed what I could. When I walked into my room, I found my Xbox 360 smashed to pieces, every CD I owned, shattered, just destroyed out of pure spite. It hurt, more than I want to admit. But I took a picture of the wreckage anyway, just in case. Then I grabbed what clothes and belongings I could salvage and got the hell out of there. Later, Grandpa's lawyer said I could sue them for damages if I wanted to, but it would mean sitting across from them in a courtroom, listening to them lie and smear me. I just couldn't do it. At that point, I didn't ever want to lay eyes on them again. Spoiler alert, that wasn't the last time I'd see them. Anyway, fast forward, the company sold, Grandpa's legacy brought in a fortune, enough for me to start over completely. First thing I did. Bought a brand new Toyota Tundra, midnight black, like the Harley. It was perfect for hauling the bike across the country. Second thing. New phone, new number, no ties to the past. I left my hometown without so much as a goodbye. Hell, I left Florida altogether. My first stop was Nashville. I didn't even plan it, just kind of ended up there, sitting at a red light right outside the Grand Ole Opry. I remembered this old photo of Grandpa and Grandma standing there, smiling so big. I just sat there, gripping the steering wheel, blinking back tears. I stayed in Nashville a little while, picked up odd jobs, slept in the back of the Tundra, trying to figure out what the hell to do next. I could have bought a house with the money I had. But I don't know, something in me just couldn't stay still. Maybe it was paranoia, maybe it was just who I was becoming. But after a couple months, I hit the road again. And that became my life. Over the next 13 years, I crisscrossed America. I drove through 35 states, lived in 12 of them. I became a jack of all trades, master of none, except when it came to engines. I always knew how to keep the Harley and the Tundra running like clockwork. The rest? Odd jobs, quick money, new towns, new faces. I lived hard. I had girlfriends, flings, a few one-night stands I won't lie about. I learned to play guitar. I drank Jack and Coke at the Rainbow Bar on the Sunset Strip. Hell, I even met Lemmy from Motorhead once. I took Grandpa's Harley on the ride for Dime in Texas, honoring Dimebag Darrell's memory with 1,000 other bikers thundering down the highway. Life was chaotic, but it was mine. I wasn't rich. I wasn't famous. But I was free. Of course, fortune can only favor a fool for so long. In June 2019, everything changed. I was in Phoenix, Arizona, living with a girl I'd been seeing for a while. One rainy afternoon, another driver blew through a stop sign. Smashed right into the side of my Tundra. Totaled it. Broke my back bad enough that I needed surgery. Thank God Grandpa's Harley wasn't strapped in the back that day. The hospital bills? Devastating. I hadn't had insurance, I'd never stayed anywhere long enough to qualify. So, I drained my emergency fund just to survive. I hated it, I hated every second of it, but there was no choice. That girl I was dating, bless her heart, she took care of me when I first got out of the hospital. She helped me until I could walk again. After that, I moved into a tiny one-bedroom apartment, using a moving company because I was still too broken to lift anything heavier than a coffee mug. I was healing. I was alive. But for the first time in a long, long while, I was standing still. Just when it felt like my life was finally starting to get back on track, boom, the whole world slammed on the brakes, COVID hit, and everything shut down almost overnight. I wasn't working steady hours back then, barely scraping by, and honestly, I was living off my savings without a second thought. I hadn't touched that money for nearly a decade, but the harsh truth was I also hadn't added a single penny to it either. When I finally made the decision to move back to Florida, reality hit me like a ton of bricks. I had to make one of the hardest choices of my life. I had to sell my grandpa's Harley, yeah, the same Harley that had been like a symbol of freedom for me. To this day, there's a part of me that can't forgive myself for letting it go. The whole situation started after a phone call with my old friend, let's call him Brandon. You might remember him. He's the one who let me crash at his place years ago while Grandpa's lawyer helped sell the company. Turns out, Brandon had built an entire career as a mechanic and even owned his own shop. Pretty amazing, right? During that phone call, which honestly feels like it just happened yesterday, he told me he needed another set of hands at the shop. It was the perfect opportunity if only I could actually get there. With the little bit of money I had left, making the trip wasn't an option, but if I sold the Harley, I could swing it. Now, you're not gonna believe this, but I actually knew the perfect guy to sell it to. This collector had been searching for my exact Harley model from that specific year. Between how well I'd kept the bike and how badly he wanted it, I ended up getting a pretty sweet deal, and when I say sweet, I mean enough cash not just to get me back to Florida, but also cover a 6-month lease on an apartment. And Brandon? He wasn't done looking out for me. He had already lined up a place for me to live, something I'll always be grateful for. There's something important I've left out until now, and trust me, it's gonna surprise you. I actually reconnected with my parents back in 2015, I still don't know why I did it. One random night, I found myself dialing their old landline, a number that, even now, I can recite by heart. I had no clue what to expect, maybe anger. Silence. Honestly, I braced for anything but what actually happened. They picked up, and their voices were filled with pure joy. They were just happy I was alive, not a word of blame about selling Grandpa's company, nothing but love. Turns out, my dad had started his own business, in the same industry, no less. I have no idea if his company's bigger or better than Grandpa's ever was, but from what I can tell, they're doing just fine. They've kept the lights on, the bills paid, even through the chaos of the pandemic, and honestly, at the end of the day, that's what really matters, isn't it? Even though we talked on the phone a lot, we didn't really do video calls. They're just not exactly tech-savvy people, but I did learn one major thing: I had a new little sister. She's 12 years old now. I'm not gonna share her name here for privacy, but trust me, she's an awesome kid. Here's a wild twist: my parents were only 39 when I left home. Mom got pregnant just a few months after I left, and it wasn't an easy pregnancy because of her age, but against all odds, my little sister was born happy and healthy, and unlike my parents, she's super techie. She figured out video calls way faster than I ever could. There was only one time, years ago, when I made a quick trip back to Florida and got to meet her. She was just a little ball of energy, and during all those years of calls and messages, nothing ever made me think my parents hadn't changed. But oh man, I was wrong. I found that out the hard way. You're not gonna believe what the whole blow-up was about. My hair, yeah, my hair. See, after I had back surgery, I stopped bothering with haircuts. Before that, I always kept it buzzed short, easy, clean, no fuss, but while I was stuck recovering, just the thought of bending over to shave my head made me ache, so I let it grow. And then, the day I finally decided to go get it trimmed, boom, the world shut down, COVID lockdown started, barbershops closed, and my plans went out the window. At first, I didn't really care, but about a year and a half after surgery, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror and thought, dang, I actually kinda like it. Fast forward to now. I don't just like my long hair, I absolutely love it. It's part of who I am. Sometimes when I see old pictures of my buzzcut self, I barely recognize the guy staring back. So right before I left Colorado, where I was living at the time, I gave my parents a call. I told them I was moving back. They were thrilled, almost bouncing off the walls with excitement. They begged me to come straight to their place. But I had other plans. I wanted to settle into the apartment Brandon had found for me first. They still don't know I once lived with Brandon while waiting for Grandpa's company to be sold, and honestly, I'm keeping it that way. Brandon even surprised me by buying me a brand new bed to get me started. I picked up some furniture and essentials with my own money too. There's still a few things I want to add, but they can wait. I also made a big move, sold my Toyota Tundra, bought a smaller, older Tacoma instead. No need for a diesel truck anymore. After my first paycheck from Brandon's shop cleared, I finally felt ready to go visit my parents. I arranged to head over to their place this past weekend, and let me tell you, nothing could have prepared me for what happened next. Driving up the old street I grew up on felt downright eerie, like stepping back into a time machine. Same cracked sidewalks, same streetlights, everything looked frozen in time. When I pulled into the driveway, my little sister was already running toward me, beaming from ear to ear. It felt amazing. She wrapped me in a giant hug the second I stepped out of my truck. At first, my parents were all smiles too, but as they got a better look at me, or rather, at my long hair, their faces started to change. Little by little, the smiles faded. And by the time I stood fully in front of them, their expressions were ice cold. But honestly, in that moment, it didn't even hit me. I was too busy hugging my little sister, who clearly didn't care about how long my hair was or wasn't. What happened next, though you won't believe. Honestly, the subtle dig started less than 5 minutes after I stepped through the door. I sat down with my little sister. She was so excited to show me her Roblox game, when my dad walked up behind us and said, "That hair's looking pretty today, Missy." At first, I smiled, thinking he was teasing her. But when I looked up, he was staring dead at me. I tried to brush it off, I really did. But it kept coming. Later, Mom asked me, with this cold little smirk, how does a boy even maintain curls that long? And it wasn't a loving tone either, it was judgment, plain and simple. As the day went on, the comments just got worse. Twice, My dad made these gross, totally inaccurate insinuations, stuff like, you might want to trim down before some creep at night mistakes you for a girl. I mean, seriously. I'm 6 feet 1 inch, 250 pounds, work out 4 days a week, and rock a full John Wick beard. Who the hell is mistaking me for a woman? Later, he pulled me into the kitchen for a so-called private conversation. What I didn't realize was that Mom had quietly sent my sister to her room, so they could double-team me without witnesses. He leaned in, gave me this look, and said, "Is there something you want to tell us about?" It hit me right then, he thought I was in the closet. And look, there's obviously nothing wrong with that, but it just plain didn't fit. I shook my head and said, "No, why?" He sneered and said, "The way you've come in here, your hair, this prissy little body of yours." That one made me blink. Little? I laughed in disbelief. "I'm bigger than you." I shot back. "And I am, objectively." But he just raised an eyebrow like he didn't believe me. "Are you?" he said, like some smug movie villain. "Yes, Dad, I am," I said, standing my ground. Then came the kicker. "So you aren't gay? Prove it." I stared at him. For a second, I honestly couldn't believe the words that had just come out of his mouth. "I could," I said slowly, "but I'm not going to, because you don't get to know a damn thing about that part of my life anymore." "I disagree," he snapped. "I don't care," I said. He exploded, "You don't care, young man? Who do you think you're talking to?" And right then, it hit me like a freight train. They still thought they could control me. Like I was still some scared kid sneaking out of the house at 16, not a grown man who'd survived everything life threw at him. "Right now?" I said, voice cold, "I have no idea who I'm talking to." And then he dropped this gem. "No straight man has long hair." I actually laughed at that one. "Really? Tell that to literally half the dudes from the 70s and 80s. He waved his hand like none of that mattered. "You need a haircut," he barked. "And why's that?" I asked. "Because I said so. You're a mechanic, you get your hair snagged in a machine, your mother and I will have to bury your decapitated body." "Real comforting, Dad." I calmly explained, like I was talking to a toddler, that I keep it tied up and tucked safely into my shirt whenever I'm working around machines. It wasn't enough. He started mocking me, repeating "ponytail" over and over, dripping with sarcasm. Then he just blurted it out. "You're gay, son, you need to accept it." I opened my mouth to end the conversation, but that's when I heard it. The buzzing sound. The sound of electric clippers turning on. I spun around, and saw my mother coming at me, trying to shave my head. She managed to shear a good chunk out of my beard before I could react. That was it. The final straw. I yanked the trimmers out of her hand and spiked them into the ground like a damn Gronk touchdown. Plastic pieces flew everywhere. Everyone just froze. I could feel the rage boiling over. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I roared at them. They said nothing, just stared. Maybe for the first time, they were seeing the man I'd become. I took a deep breath, found my sister, and said goodbye. I kept it simple. I told her our parents didn't respect me, that respect matters, and that I loved her more than anything. I promised her I'd do everything I could to stay in touch, even though, deep down, I wasn't sure if that promise would be possible. As I turned to leave, Dad shouted after me. "You're under my roof now. You'll do what I say." I turned and shouted right back. "Good thing I'll never be under your roof ever again." I told them, until they could accept that I'm a grown-ass adult, they'd never hear from me again. And I slammed the door behind me. Since then, just one angry voicemail from Dad. Otherwise, total silence. Until tonight. Tonight, my little sister snuck a call to me on her babysitter's phone. We FaceTimed for a little while, and I told her some of the things about my childhood I thought she was old enough to understand. After we hung up, I sat there and cried. Cried because I miss her. Cried because my parents are never going to change. Cried because sometimes, love just isn't enough to fix what's broken. Now I'm sitting here wondering. Should I cut them off completely, even if it means losing her too?